Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Craig DeLuz here, Firearms Policy Coalition, and this is Coffee with Craig. We very much appreciate you guys tuning in and being a part in the fight for our civil rights. Please make it a point to like and share this video feed right now so that your friends can become our friends and join us in the conversation. Also, please take a moment to like or to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And to follow our Facebook page. You guys know we don't just do these videos, but we do all sorts of legislative alerts and legislative actions, telling you guys what's going on across the country in gun rights, to give you and working largely to give you guys an opportunity to be able to take action. Also, wanted to encourage you guys to please join FPC, join the Firearms Policy Coalition, become a member today. It's real simple. Just go to joinfpc.org. Just joinfpc.org or .com. Anyway, join FPC. It's real simple. And then also want to remind you, if you already a member, wanted to remind you once again that the FPC Gear store is open. FPCgear.com. That's FPCgear.com. All sorts of cool t-shirts and whatnot. Tons of different or multiple different designs that you will find enjoyable. And the best part about the whole thing is the money goes right back into the fight for our constitutional right to keep and bear arms. So please support the Firearms Policy Coalition by going to FPCgear.com. Now, let's get on to Coffee with Craig, which is brought to you by Sparks Black Rifle and Sacramento Black Rifle, two of the premier gun stores here on the left coast. Once again, supporting our Second Amendment rights. They're not just good gun stores. They don't just provide quality products and excellent service, but they also believe in our constitutional right to keep and bear arms and are willing to put their money where their mouth is. So thank you to Rob and to Gordon for all of the assistance that you provide us here at FPC. Check them out. Definitely places where you need to get some good stuff. All right, so let's get into today's topic, shall we? I'm thinking that this week is probably going to wind up just being hashtag wearing orange week. Now, as many of or some of you may know, the state of New York has passed legislation known as the SAFE Act, which is a sweeping piece of anti-Second Amendment, anti-civil rights legislation that goes a very long way in violating the constitutional rights and the right to keep and bear arms of gun owners in the state of New York. Well, one of the premier architects, Mr. Schneiderman, is the Attorney General there in the state of New York. Now, we all know, because we've all followed, for those of you who follow the hashtag wearing orange or hashtag wear orange movement as we have taken it over, we like to use hashtag wear orange as a way in which to point out all of the politicians, the anti-gun politicians who have decided that, they want to take away the right to keep and bear arms because that makes them feel morally superior, while at the same time actually kind of losing the moral high ground by actually getting charged with and, in some cases going to jail. Well, Mr. Schneiderman has found himself in this spot of legal trouble that could wind up having him wearing orange. Check it out.
Manhattan District Attorney's Office says it has opened an investigation into the allegations against Schneiderman. The New Yorker spoke to 4 women, 2 who gave their names. And what the women allege is in direct contradiction to the causes Schneiderman has spent more than a decade supporting.
A woman does not have the right to control her own body. She is not truly equal.
New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman built his career as a liberal progressive who stood up for women's rights. But on Monday, in a New Yorker report, the 63-year-old was described as a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde who was physically and emotionally abusive in private toward 4 women. Among them, Michelle Manning Barish, who told the New Yorker she began a romantic relationship with Schneiderman in 2013 that quickly turned violent. She claimed he was a heavy drinker and described one instance where he allegedly called her a whore and forcibly slapped her directly on her ear. He then allegedly used his body weight to hold her down and began to choke her.
We've begun a long overdue reckoning with our culture of violence and silence.
Tanya Selvaretnam said she met Schneiderman in 2016 and described her relationship with him as a fairy tale that became a nightmare. Selvaretnam, who was born in Sri Lanka, said Schneiderman started calling her his brown slave and would sometimes tell her to call him master. She alleged he would frequently slap her across the face, choke her, and spit on her. It wasn't consensual, she said. This wasn't sexual play acting.
Yeah, so clearly Mr. Schneiderman, well, hypocrisy is evidently not new to him. Evidently, he says he wants to believe and supports the issues and the values of women, and yet and still he could wind up doing jail time for some of the stuff that he's being accused of. But see, the hypocrisy in New York doesn't just stop at this individual. It doesn't just stop at Mr. Schneiderman, because there are a number of architects in this particular case who have actually wound up as a part of the as a part of this thing. Some of you may remember Sheldon Silver, who wound up being charged with corruption. He was also one of the leaders of the movement there to ban basically to ban and take away the rights of New Yorkers when it comes to the Second Amendment.
Arguments in the corruption retrial of former New York Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver. He's accused of collecting nearly $4 million in illegal kickbacks.
$4 million in illegal kickbacks. Well, but that's just New York. It's not necessarily the anti-gun folks who are doing this stuff. It's New York. But wait a minute. What about one of the other architects? What about this individual right here, Dean Skelos, who was also convicted and sentenced for corruption? He also was a part of the cabal there in New York in order to help pass the SAFE Act.
Well, Jeff, yet another politician is now a convicted felon in that once 3 men in a room. Well, that's dwindling down to only 1 tonight. This after State Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos is found guilty of corruption charges during a federal trial. He was found guilty by a federal jury on charges of public corruption. His son Adam, also found guilty, was at the heart of this scandal, as a jury found Skelos used his office to extort $300,000 in salary and other kickbacks for his son.
See, let's just be frank here and understand that when it comes to the right to keep and bear arms, when it comes to the attacks on the Second Amendment, it's all political theater, because these folks don't care about civil rights. They want to use their attacks on your rights in order to elevate themselves. And also, though, in order to take away attention from the fact that they are criminals. That they themselves are acting, in a way that is not only not moral, but definitely not legal. The organization, you guys remember them, Mayors Against Illegal Guns. I talk about them all the time. They had a number of politicians that supported them, or that supported their efforts, that they recruited and brought in order to fight these things. And they wound up eventually having to disband the organization because the politicians were, well, too corrupt. Folks like, let's see here, Mr. Lee Lin-Yi, you know him, Mr. Wearing Orange. He is the funniest one because he was actually convicted of gun running. Yes, he was actually convicted of putting together negotiating a legal firearms transaction that included rocket launchers. Yeah, that included rocket launchers. There's also Mr. Silva, who was accused of having inappropriate relationships with individuals under the age of consent, but mostly for corruption charges. And he owned a firearm that actually wound up used in a shooting. The firearm would eventually wind up getting traced back to him. He was the mayor of Stockton, California. As we can see, Mr. Schneiderman could actually wind up being in 2018 joining his fellow colleagues in the Wear Orange community. I guess the only real reason why I point this out is because, once again, the hypocrisy of what these folks are. You don't know what they stand for, what they really stand for, what they're doing behind closed doors. We don't know the illegal stuff that these folks are working on. But, I just find it very hard for these individuals to claim the moral high ground, to preach to us about why we should surrender our rights to them while they are engaging in corruption, in gun running, in assault, and in sexual assault, in inappropriate sexual behavior, in all sorts of things that would lead one to understand that, look, they are the very definition of a tyrannical government. They are going out of their way to make sure that they use their positions, their power over us, to benefit themselves and to harm others. And so, because they are so willing to do that, as government officials, we then should trust them, give up our right to defend ourselves against them. I'm sorry, I'm just not buying that. I, for one, just happen to believe that if we give up our rights, to be able to defend ourselves against criminals, whether in elective office or not in elective office, against those who seek to do harm against us, if we give up our right to do that, then we're not just hurting ourselves. We're hurting our children. We're hurting our families. We're hurting the next generation. Because, tyranny, literally, folks, we are one step away from chaos and tyranny. We quite frankly, we really are. And it doesn't really matter who's in office, because all it really takes is for those who are in office to decide that they know better than we do, and therefore they feel it's not just their right, not just their ability, not just their job, but their responsibility to take away our rights, because they know better than we do. These are people who want to tell us how to raise our children. These are people who want to tell us what we can eat. They want to tell us what we can read. They want to tell us what we can watch on TV. They want to tell us what we can think. And then they want to tell us how we can defend ourselves from them. Nah, I'm not buying it. Anyway, folks, that's going to be today's Coffee with Craig. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, please remember to like and share these videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook. And most importantly, join FPC. Become a member today. Join us as a part of the fight for civil rights. Remember, you got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.